Chapter 7 Business Talent. After Suzu finished reading, she looked at all the boys present with a tranquil expression. Beside her, Lin Mikiao had a proud and disdainful look on her face after hearing the love letter. A trace of a cold smile formed on her pretty lips. Even though she was sneering, she looked so moving. The people in the classroom seemed to have been struck by lightning and no one spoke for a long time. After a while, a girl said, "This person couldn't have come out of a mental hospital, right? Who was he? He's more than shameless, he's just dog shit. Who wrote it?" "That's right, he's too shameless." One person spoke, the others followed. One by one, they began to salivate at the owner of this love letter. The letter actually caused public anger. "Teacher, which shameless person wrote this love letter?" "That's right, stand forward." Suzu suppressed the furious crowd with her hand, and spoke with a moderated tone, "As for who wrote this love letter, I will not mention it. I hope that he will not have these daydreams again in the future. If he has the energy, then he should focus on his studies." "I wrote that." Some people evidently didn't understand Suzu's kindness and stood up himself. With a hua sound, everyone's eyes turned to look at the person who stood up, and it was actually Qin Hao. Therefore, Qin Hao became famous. Not only did he leave a deep impression to the school beauty, he also left a deep impression to the whole class. Soon he became synonymous with words like shameless. Seeing everyone's attitude towards Qin Hao, Tang Wei, who was seated at the side, finally had a pleasant feeling, but obviously, Qin Hao did not care about the attitude of others, and was still immersed in his own good feeling. After class, he carried his school bag on the shoulder, stuck one hand in his pants pocket, and leisurely walked out of the classroom, whistling under everyone's strange gazes. "Qin Hao, you f***ing stop!" Tang Wei chased after him with his men. If it was said that everyone had sympathy and pity towards Qin Hao when they saw Tang Wei make a move on him in the past, they were now looking forward to Tang Wei teaching this shameless person a lesson, especially those boys who had a crush on Lin Mikiao. His love letter was an insult to the goddess in their hearts. "What did you say?" Qin Hao turned his body abruptly, and seeing that Tang Wei was already right in front of him, without saying a word, he kicked out with his foot. "Ah!" The sound was not made by Tang Wei, but the people around him. Tang Wei did not even have the chance to scream, he was kicked to the corner of the classroom and fainted. While everyone was still in shock, Qin Hao had already said one sentence, "That's the price." With that, he walked away. After he left, many people only recovered from their shock after a long time. This was simply too hard to believe. Was this an illusion? But how could it be so real? Qin Hao walked back to his residence, but didn't meet any of the so-called experts that Tang Wei had invited. That guy was now in the hospital again. This time, it was much more serious than the last time. He had suffered internal injuries and would need at least 1 to 2 months of rest. Now, he had formed a sworn feud with Tang Wei. Qin Hao knew that Tang Wei would definitely not let this matter rest. With his abilities, he would definitely find an even more powerful expert to deal with him. Therefore, right now, Qin Hao urgently needed to improve his own strength. Strength was his capital for being awesome. With his current strength, dealing with ordinary people like Tang Wei was naturally not a problem, but to deal with those experts with martial skills, he did not have absolute confidence in winning. Qin Hao decided to spend some time to complete the great perfection stage of the first stage martial cultivator. If he cultivated with a normal method, it would be extremely time-consuming, and he did not have the patience to waste time like this. Fortunately, he was an expert in medicine and could use it to assist his cultivation, speeding up the cultivation. The medicines used to aid the cultivation of a first-stage martial cultivator were not too complicated. He could easily concoct them. He had picked a lot of herbs near the cave where the accident happened, now he was short of a few herbs to purchase from the pharmacy. 100 Herb Hall was Shanghai City's largest traditional Chinese medicine store, and it had the most complete collection of traditional Chinese medicine herbs. Qin Hao spent half an hour to reach 100 Herb Hall. Walking into the spacious medicine hall and looking at the shelves filled with Chinese medicines, he had no idea about them in the past, but now he could recount the names of each of those herbs, as well as their specific effect. After walking for a while, Qin Hao picked out a dozen or so herbs that he needed and asked the waiter to wrap them up, bringing them to the toll room to settle the bill. There was someone in the toll room, so he had to line up. In front of him were two women, one older and one young. As Qin Hao stood behind them, his eyes were immediately attracted by the slim figure of the young lady in front of him. The girl seemed to have felt the fiery gaze behind her as she hurriedly turned around to take a glance. With this, Qin Hao's eyes lit up, and two huge words immediately surfaced in his mind: beautiful girl. Long hair like a waterfall, a standard oval face, intelligent almond eyes, and the collar of black business suit naturally opened, revealing a white shirt collar. Tight black pants accentuated the long slender legs. She looked both elegant and beautiful at the same time. That calm and dignified demeanor of her made people unable to easily offend her. With a glance, he could tell that she was either an urban white-collar lady or a strong woman. Hello. Qin Hao hastily greeted the beauty with a smile. The beauty also responded with a professional smile. She slightly nodded her head and turned around. At the same time, she straightened her back so that her buttocks wouldn't tilt backwards so much to avoid the sinister stares coming from behind. Qin Hao saw through the beauty's intentions and laughed embarrassedly. He then looked at the old lady beside the beauty, embarrassed. He wasn't the kind of person who was nice to both young and old people, he only felt that there was something wrong with this old woman. The old woman was sitting, and the young beauty was supporting her. As the chair was placed slanted, it made the old lady sit sideways so that Qin Hao could see her profile. Her face was very white, almost transparent, not the healthy kind, but sickly white. Perhaps she had been well cared for, and the wrinkles on her face were not much, but they were a little disordered. Half of her eyes were visible from the side, and they were glazed and lifeless. This old woman had a big problem. Qin Hao could tell a person's problem just from looking at the side. He couldn't help but admire that Yuan Hao's amazing medical skills back then. "Aunt Mizan, I'm sorry to have kept you two waiting. Your medicine has been prepared." At this moment, a man in his 30s wearing a white coat and glasses walked out of the pharmacy with several packets of medicine. He had an apologetic look on his face. While he was speaking, his eyes constantly peeked at the young beauty's face and chest in front of him. A gentle beast. Qin Hao gave the man a fitting label, and looked at the man's identity badge. The name, position and title were written on the badge. At this distance, it might have been difficult for an ordinary person's vision to make out the words written on it, but ever since Qin Hao had become the martial cultivator, his sight, hearing, and sense of smell had all increased by a large amount. He could clearly make out the words written on it. Name, Queen Ayu. His title was actually a Vice Director Alchemist. Pharmacy professional titles were divided into Assistant Pharmacist, Pharmacist, Supervisor Pharmacist, Vice Chief Pharmacist, and Chief Pharmacist. He had already become a Vice Chief Pharmacist since he was 30 years old. He could already be considered a powerful existence. "Thank you so much, Dr. Kui." The beautiful woman surnamed and politely smiled in thanks. Actually, the beauty's name was Enru. In Shanghai City's business world, she was definitely a famous name, and was praised as the youngest and prettiest business talent, becoming the most inspiring symbol of the Shanghai City. She was from the countryside, entered the city to wander around at 16, start a career from scratch, go through countless jobs and hardships that ordinary people could not imagine. After 10 years of struggle, she became the CEO of one of the top 50 enterprises in the country, the Xionglan Corporation, with over 1 billion fortune. And she also studied her own diploma, from a junior high school degree to a master's degree. Today, she had brought her mother here to see doctor. Her mother had a strange disease that made her often have a headache and tightness in her chest. Sometimes, the pain even made her want to die. This disease had been tormented her for more than 10 years already, and in these past few years, Anru had spent countless money to invite countless famous doctors, and even sent her to the top hospitals abroad. However, they were all completely useless. Sometimes, the relief would only be temporary. Within a few months, she would have a relapse. In the end, she had no choice but to give up on Western medicine and choose Chinese medicine. This pharmacist called Queen Ayu was been introduced to her by someone, and it was said that he was a very outstanding Chinese medicine master. "Misson, you're too polite. Healing patients has always been my duty. No need to thank me." Queen Ayu acted like a modest gentleman, but Qin Hao thought he was a hypocrite. Anru was still politely smiling. "No matter what, I still need to thank you." "Oh right, how much is this?" "You should calculate it as well, even including the previous medicinal herbs." "Oh, don't worry, Misson. Let's wait for Aunt to use the medicine before we talk about the results." Queen Ayu cleverly changed the subject and avoided talking about money. He wasn't willing to pay the bill right now. Otherwise, how would he be able to find an opportunity to interact with the beautiful woman, and he didn't want to miss out on a typical rich and beautiful woman. "Then, thank you, Dr. Kui." Anru thanked him politely and helped her mother up. "Mom, let's go." Mother An didn't said a word. She seemed like an honest, silent person. She just nodded and stood up. "I'll help you carry the medicine to the car. Auntie, please be careful. The ground is not flat, let me support you." After saying that, Queen Ayu held the medicine in one hand while supporting Mother An on the other side. Qin Hao rolled his eyes. "Damn, the ground is very flat, alright? Wait a moment, Misson, do you have any ginseng in your medicine?" Just as Anru was about to leave, Qin Hao stopped them from leaving and asked. His eyes then fell on Queen Ayu's bag of herbs. It was wrapped in medicinal paper, so he couldn't see it with his eyes, but he could smell the scent of ginseng through his nose. Anru looked at Qin Hao in shock. She was surprised that the man did not even need to open the bag to know what the medicines were. And she was surprised by the question. "Yes, there's a ginseng. Why are you asking this?" "There's a ginseng. Why are you asking this?"